Bitcoin has made new all-time highs, but is now pulling back for the first time. And naturally, the question is it all over? Is this the end? Is this the end times as we get ready for down only? Well, of course, we'll be discussing that in today's video, going over more the long-term for Bitcoin, speaking about the next month or two price action, then, of course, short-term areas of interest for a bit of a pullback. Other than that, I just want to jump right into this one as I get my notes up on over here and start it off, as always, with some good old daily price action statistics. And as we can see, once again, for what seems like the infinity time, Bitcoin on yesterday did indeed once again wick off the top side of the average returns range highs. And now we are about to see Bitcoin likely test the bottom side of the average range lows for Tuesday. Tuesday does have more or less very muted gains on average and muted losses compared to other weekdays, with an average gain of about 2% for positive gaining Tuesdays versus an average loss of about 171 again for those negative closing Tuesdays since this bull market began. In today's video, contrary to yesterday's video, I do believe that the downside of these is much more likely to get tested. And of course, yesterday we did test the upside. Now it is going to be very likely a downside test. So if you do see Bitcoin more or less hit the bottom range boundary, which would be somewhere around about 122,500 US dollars, I would be looking for a bounce on the first pass. Again, on the first pass for very, very short-term time frame scalpers, this has been an absolutely crazy money play since we started to reference this indicator and the ranges that are created on average for a day-to-day basis. So if you're a short-term time frame scalper, keep an eye on that level, because very likely you're going to see at least a small bounce from that number, again, on the first pass. Second pass, not the same thing, not the same thing. And again, if you're watching this video in the future, it's very likely that there might be a second pass in which, no, I would not play that. But again, if you want access to this indicator, and you're more of that sort of short-term daily scalper, well, that can be had for free for 7 days in the link description below for Teachable. And you can find your link in there to the Caretaker's Indicator Suite package, and it'll come with this indicator right here. Anyways, moving on from there, getting into the higher term time frame stuff for Bitcoin, and probably the more interesting stuff for I think most people on this channel now is, of course, the old moon signal. The moon signals have fired off once again. This is the real signal that I think most people are waiting for, naturally, of course. And we can see that the traditionally bullish moon, the full moon, has fired off as of today, and we will actually see this one enter into a position from the Quant Prime service once we get today's closure confirming the good old full moon. But right now, of course, that is coming later tonight, 9 hours, 45 minutes, and 30 seconds and counting. And this has generally been a period of upside for the next, 2 weeks, about 14 to 15 days. We've seen several of these play out relatively recently for those upside moons, if you want to call it that. Again, I know that this is intellectually challenging for most people because you're like, the moons, but it seems to work. But the moons, who gives a fuck about this? Well, I don't really care. All I care about is statistics. Again, if you're on this channel, you have to understand that our priority here is looking at stats. If that's not you, I sincerely don't know what the hell you're doing on this channel. You're probably going to be very angry, which, hey, fair enough. I appreciate the engagement, but yeah, we ain't going to change that, at least not anytime soon. So I do want to show you a few of the last iterations because they have been pretty big moves, actually. In fact, the most recent one that we saw from a full moon firing off was back in early September. That led Bitcoin from about 111,000 bucks all the way up to a high of 118. Of course, before that, we did see this one fire off right before Bitcoin put in the prior all-time high. And even the one prior to that in July, again, creating new all-time highs along the way. And we've seen many of these, play out very, very well over the past, really over the past history of Bitcoin. And if you were to just blindly play this as a super, super simplistic setup, again, I'm not saying it's the best setup or the most optimized setup, is certainly not. But if you were to blindly play this with opening a position when that full moon fired off and then closing it 2 weeks later, well, these would have been your results over the past 10 years. And you can see that generally speaking, the equity curve is beautiful and up and to the right. Is it optimized? No. Is it smooth? Not really. But again, it does give us an upside bias throughout this next 2 weeks of period. Not always, but again, on average, yes, that does seem to play out. And the profit factor is about 1.5. Now, on top of this, what I'm most interested in is looking at the average winning trade and the average losing trade, because it gives us an area of interest on both sides within the next 2 weeks if this one actually does play out. And by the way, the success rate of this is just over 55% for any given trade. So, it's not much better than a coin flip, but when you do win, the wins are significantly greater than the losses. The average winning trade returns 13.25%. The average losing trade losing just under 8%. So again, even with the 55% strike rate, that is going to produce a nice positive equity curve And we can now come up with areas of interest specifically for today. So again, taking today's, today's current price, if Bitcoin were to play that out to the upside, again, these are averages. There's going to be some variance within these. That would put Bitcoin somewhere around $140,000 if it played out to the average. And again, we expect this. No, this quite literally will encompass the time range between today and the next 14 to 15 days. So that would put us into the last about the 22nd of August. So August. Oh my God, I'm actually redacted. It's right in front of my fucking face. It's October. Holy shit. I am retarded. Anyways, accompany me on this journey as I realize the truth of who I am. Anyways, to the downside, 8% to the downside within the next couple of weeks would put Bitcoin back down around 113,500. I do think that there's a very critical number to be aware of, which we'll go over later in this video, that would very likely imply that this is going to be a failure. But until that number is really violated, let's say, I'm generally going to be looking to the upside for this period of time. I do believe that if Bitcoin was going to see downside during this month, it very likely would have happened in the first week, and we are at the end of the first week right now, which if you recall to last week's statistics video, the low of October for positive closing Octobers generally happens around the end of the first week. So obviously, Bitcoin has been more or less straight up, in fact, having the low of the month thus far on the first day of October. So if it did make a new low below basically the 1st of October, which would be about 114, at any point, it's probably going to be a good indication that this is going to be a negative closing month. And all of these go out the window, or it's not necessarily that they go out the window, but we go and rely on the negative side of these statistics, getting areas of interest for that. So yeah. Anyways, until then, generally, like I said, Bitcoin can have short-term pullbacks. We'll go over areas of interest for that a little bit later. In fact, we've already kind of gone over some, but I'm generally looking for higher lows. Anyways, moving on from there, we did indeed see the conditions met for the 5-day 5 EMA setup firing off. This one, again, using the Quant Prime service to backtest this. And yes, you can automate this as well, similar to the Moon setup over here. They're both running off of the Quant Prime service, and we have tutorials exactly on how to do this. Again, you can try this out for free. In the link description below, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. But looking at this right here, the 5-day time frame did indeed close above that red 5 EMA. It is a super simplistic setup. It opens along whenever that happens and then closes that long when Bitcoin closes below that same moving average. We've seen many of these play out over the past few years since we started referencing this on this channel, and it does catch, and it has caught every major trending move that Bitcoin has had throughout this time, specifically to the upside, not necessarily to the downside. Now, this particular setup does have a lower probability to win any particular trade. Just under 40% of any particular trade does have a positive closure in terms of P&L, but the profit factor is very fucking high. 4.3 or 4.32 almost, as you can see right there. So if we go over the past 10 years of history, that beautiful equity curve is stair-stepping up, then going sideways, and stair-stepping up and going sideways. What does that tell you? It tells you that this relies on those big trending moves to make the big gains, and then the periods of sideways, you're just kind of seeing small losses and very small gains as Bitcoin chops it up sideways. So this strategy is really designed to catch those big trending moves, and then when Bitcoin's not trending, it's just designed to not lose that much and also not gain that much, more or less keep it flat. Again, going into the strategy tester here and looking at the trade analysis, we can see the average amount of bars in winning trades is 10 bars. The average amount of bars in losing trades is 2 bars. So if this setup is going to fail, we expect it somewhere around the closure of the second bar. As of right now, we are on the first bar, in fact. So if Bitcoin survives, the next 5 days without closing below, let's call it 118, which is where that red 5 EMA is on this time frame, then yeah, that does imply that this is more than likely going to be one of those winners. And then we can go ahead and look at this data and see what is the average returns for those winning trades, of which the winning trades on average return 36.5%, which is pretty fucking big. The average losing trade is about 5.5%. So if Bitcoin were to close this one positively, again, we've already gone over this, but I will just raise the roof because I already know that we need it. And 36.5% to the upside. Again, averages, not exact. Averages, variance, learn, statistical. Maybe I should make a video on statistics language. But yeah, about 10 bars out would put us where? That would put us in middle of November. From that initial signal, and 36% to the upside will put Bitcoin somewhere around 164, 165 region. Again, variance around this, so maybe it's a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit less, but somewhere around there if this one does succeed. If it does fail, we would expect it to fail basically between now and the middle of October. That's when failure is most likely. So if it doesn't fail between now and let's just say about 5-10 days out from now, Again, just generally looking up and to the right into the end of into the middle/end of November. Again, variance around these numbers. In fact, the last one that we saw was quite a long one, I think. No, sorry, I'm thinking of something else. But ultimately, yeah. Overall, ultimately, yes, this does help out with the bullish bias. But again, that will be completely undone if this one does fail, which would require a 5-day closure below 118. By the way, 5-day time frame is closing tonight, so that is going to be the first closure after the initial open in 9 hours and 37 minutes and 40 seconds and counting. So yes, basically Bitcoin just needs to remain above there for the next, I would say, 5 to 10 days, and the probability of this one being a winner is greatly increased. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into, and also I just want to highlight the, those targets over time. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to get into, of course, what was this? What did we want to speak about over here? Yeah, the 5-day stochastic momentum pivot. This one is continuing to the upside as long as Bitcoin's above 117,550. Again, around that 118-ish number that we spoke about right here. So that 5 EMA and the stochastic momentum pivot offering good confluence. That number is very much significant. Let's just call it 118. We'll go with the higher one of those. Basically, Bitcoin can pull back to 118, and that's okay. Closing below 118, not okay. That does destroy what I'm going to be having as a bias, probably for the next month for general upside, or maybe even a little bit more than a month. Anyways, moving on from there, just speaking about short-term pullbacks, again, just very specifically speaking about short-term pullbacks, I should say, yeah, on the daily time frame, we can see that there is bearish divergence building on the daily RSI for Bitcoin spot. We are connecting the highs from May, or late May, I should say, with the prior all-time high in middle of June, with, again, the new all-time high of just yesterday, I suppose. And they're all actually coming in around this same sort of trendline regression here. So I do think that does warrant consideration. And, if Bitcoin wants to pull back a little bit here, that's fine. Again, pulling back here, not a problem. Below 118, big problem. That would also bring Bitcoin below that last swing high that we did see from September, and also the 618 retracement. If you're looking at a bearish Fibonacci retracement, this was also our bullish bias buster, if you will. If you recall, before Bitcoin was above this number last week, we were generally having a corrective bias for Bitcoin. But once Bitcoin exceeded it, that changed the bias on this channel to upside with just generally new all-time highs. That also implies Bitcoin must hold above there. So in the short term, if Bitcoin pulls back, 120 is fine. Where it's at right now at 122.5 is also fine. If it came down to 118, that's also fine. Just don't want to see it closing below there. That's when things start to change. And that's where you're probably going to hear me start to turn into like a mega bear. But until then, still more things favoring the upside. Just be super, super abundantly clear. On top of this, we can go ahead and look at the the weekly HPDR for CME. And the weekly HPDR reclaimed as of last week the median here. And where is the median now? It's at about 120. So again, if Bitcoin were to come back down to this number, just retest this number, reconnect with the 5-day 5 EMA, this is all fine. This is all not problematic. Below this number, that's where CME starts to become a little bit more, questionable, I suppose. But again, CME and spot price action are different time schedules for their closures. For the 5-day, for example, this one's not closing tonight. It's closing in 3 days and 7 hours. So again, we can see all of these things more or less hit just on different time frames. And that's also another big point of of confusion generally when I read the comments. But I totally get that. You just have to understand CME and spot price action, they're working on different time frames just because, of course, CME does not trade over the weekends. So naturally that is going to happen. But yeah, that does imply that this is going to be an area of interest. And then on top of this, I should also add that when we go over to our daily stochastic momentum oscillator, we are starting to see it get into some pretty critical levels here. This is about where the last major high was found in middle of September when Bitcoin was at about 118. So as of right now, it's not really in danger of turning down today. Tomorrow, perhaps yes, but right now the pivot is 121,500. So unless if Bitcoin closes below there today, it's not really in danger of turning down. Yes, getting into the critical zone is overall a strong signal. And also, of course, getting extremes on BBWP is also a strong signal that we're going to see, a bit of sideways price action. But again, as long as Bitcoin just doesn't violate 118 to the downside, especially, then, you know, higher lows are inbound more or less, and pullbacks are okay. And tentatively speaking, you know, I do think Bitcoin will pull back at least a little bit lower, like $122,500, 120, maybe even $121,500. This is again okay. Just be aware of where those higher lows start to get questionable, let's say. On top of that, short-term timeframes, yeah, they are suggesting, you know, this is a good area for a pullback, not just because we do see that that potential for daily bearish divergence right here, which will be confirmed, by the way, if Bitcoin does close below about 122 on spot price action, but also on our lower term time frame, stochastic momentum also is like the 12-hour time frame. This one's already turning down as long as Bitcoin is below 124,900. 6-hour time frame is already going to be down as well. If we can load this one up, there we go. Losing the bullish controls on here too, as long as Bitcoin is below 125. 4-hour time frame is going to be leading these, of course, and that one is also freshly turning down below 125,500 US dollars. And the hourly time frame is probably flippy floppy here, but about to turn down as well. So I do believe today's likely going to be a corrective day. You know, maybe even all the way back down to 120 overall. But again, areas of interest for bounce would be on the most, optimistic, you know, would be basically the low of today already. Very, very close to that average returns range lows. If you see this get reapproached later today or just any time, you know, after this short-term bounce, which has already played out, you know, about $400, $500 since we started this video, well, at that point, if you do see it reapproach that number, I do think you will be seeing lower overall. I think that you'll at least see like 120-ish. That'll be the next major area of interest. And below there, you got 118. So those are the next big ones where I really would be expecting an attempt for a higher low if Bitcoin is going to indeed be bullish. Again, if Bitcoin does break below 118, it's not impossible to see. It just implies different things are going on and that we should be expecting a much deeper pullback. And then I will get my personal wish, which I understand is probably not shared by many people, but my personal wish is that Bitcoin actually would spend more time consolidating sideways here and yes, play out another downside move, thus likely setting this thing up for a much more prolonged market cycle. In my opinion, it is my view that if Bitcoin just continues to new all-time highs from here, which actually is more likely as of right now, just generally, you know, just not coming down below 118 before making, you know, more new highs. Maybe that happens, you know, this week, maybe it happens next week, who knows? But it is my view that if Bitcoin does do that, we're probably going to see a parabolic blow off top in this quarter. Yes, that does mean that Bitcoin does likely reach much higher. You know, I'd imagine at least 150, maybe as much as like 170, 180, or maybe even if Fibbo Swanee target gets hit at 205, something like that. But then that also implies that we are still on that same 4-year schedule and we should be expecting the same thing that we've seen during all of these cycles, which is a monumental dump. So again, for me, it's bittersweet to see Bitcoin, you know, just zoom up to new all-time highs from here. Yes, I understand that a lot of people want to see that, of course. You know, it's probably going to bode quite well for many altcoins, but in my opinion, I would prefer stability at this point. Again, feel free to disagree with me. That's okay. That's fine. That's natural. But that's just my view. I can be massively wrong about it, as with anything. And of course, that is a good place to be leaving off on this video. We'll be back on tomorrow with another live stream analysis. I've really been looking forward to these live streams. They've been so much fun recently. I really appreciate the community engagement. Like, you guys make this shit so much fun that I literally look forward to it. It's really becoming a massive pleasure once again. And I couldn't thank you enough for that. You know, the conversations that we have are fucking great. Seems like most people are absolutely on the same page, which is absolutely amazing to see. And you know, that's what makes it fun, man. Those 2-hour streams, they fucking fly by. They fucking fly by. They really do, man. They really do. And again, it's because of the community here. So just want to say thank you for joining in on those. Of course, I understand not everyone loves them. It's okay. It's okay. Again, you can just watch these videos as well, make the analysis streamlined. Anyways, there you have it. Again, the long term and the more short term. Long term, still likely continuation. Short term, likely pullback. Just watch out for 118 if Bitcoin gets there in the next few days, or in the next 5 days, I would say, because that's where that really would start to confirm what I hope to happen. But until then, yeah, have to go with the market, and the market is positioning for higher. Anyways, with all that said, take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.